Acetaminophen toxicity is one of the most common causes of poisoning in the United States. Acetaminophen overdoses account for approximately 56,000 emergency department visits, 26,000 hospitalizations, and 450 deaths annually. Acetaminophen-induced liver toxicity is the most common cause of acute liver failure, okay? Toxicity of some drugs is due to a formation of an undesirable metabolite, which is known as NAPQI. All right, so there's a lot there, okay? And what I really want to focus on is number one, Tylenol is extremely toxic. Obviously, they talk about some statistics here of A, how it's killing people, but B, how it's one of the leading cause of acute liver failure, all right? And how it happens is that Tylenol, when you take it, is perfectly harmless. Now, this is really the important scientific part. So I'm going to switch here to a slide, and I really want you to look at what I've circled here on this graph, this picture. Acetaminophen, Tylenol in and of itself is harmless, okay? However, as it leaves the body, it starts turning into different things. It doesn't leave the body as acetaminophen, it goes through a couple changes. So what I've circled here, if you look at the picture on the top left, there's acetaminophen, okay? Acetaminophen can follow any of those different arrows to be detoxified, to be removed from the body. If you look down the left-hand pathway, one of the ways it gets detoxified through the phase 1 detox in the cytochrome P450 system is it turns into a chemical called NAPQI. So you can see it circled there on that left-hand side. With a genetic predisposition that your body doesn't make a lot of glutathione, well, guess what happens? That toxic metabolite, that NAPQI, sits in the body. It sits in the liver, it sits in the brain, and it causes damage, and it destroys cells, and it can destroy brain. If you are born with the genetics, not born with the genetics of autism, this isn't like a genetic disease, but if your genetic predisposition is you can't make glutathione very well, you can't detoxify very well, then you cannot detoxify the horrific, toxic, poisonous metabolite of acetaminophen, and it starts to kill brain cells, and it actually might be one of the contributors to autism. About how this happens, so in the middle of this picture, you can see acetaminophen, and if you follow the picture to the left, the red arrows, acetaminophen either goes to its non-toxic metabolites, that's with other sulfation pathways, or it goes through phase 1 detox to become the highly toxic metabolite NAPQI, which then gets converted with glutathione to its non-toxic metabolites. So guess what? If your child or you yourself have the genetic predisposition for poor sulfation and poor glutathione detox pathways, you're just born that way, okay? The odds of you having a toxic reaction to Tylenol are higher than the average person.
Well, if you have a bad reaction to a vaccine and you use acetaminophen, you're 6 times more likely to have a child with autism than if you have a bad reaction to a vaccine and you do not use. Now, 6 times, 600% increase is huge, right? Given what we now know about the rate of use of acetaminophen, and I'll talk about that in a bit. These things are difficult to publish, they're challenging, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But given what we know, this will account for the epidemic of autism, the quote-unquote epidemic of autism that we believe exists. Looked at this objectively with the epidemiology and with tracking back historically. And in addition, we've got a perfectly reasonable logical explanation that fits all the facts. And I'll talk about a lot of the facts as we go through it. So, all right, so the Stephen Schultz study came out, and that was in 2008. And it's a powerful paper. He says, okay, he gave his kid a vaccine. The kid gets autism just like that, right at the same time he gives the vaccine, doesn't recover from the vaccine. So he's looking at the epidemiology, trying to figure this out. And so he quits his dentistry job, and his story is public access. You can get that online. He goes back and he does a study at the University of California, getting his PhD. He had to say, okay, if it's not just the vaccine, what else could it be? So he looked at acetaminophen exposure. Acetaminophen, known as paracetamol in Europe, one of the most widely used drugs on this planet, if not the most widely used drug on the planet.